Hi everyone. Today I'm going to introduce the tip skills. The tip skills are a section of our distress tolerance skills that we use when very high emotional arousal makes it almost impossible for us to use any other skill. The tip skills are a great way to rapidly reduce our emotional arousal. So what are they? Tip includes 4 different skills. The first is tipping our body's temperature through use of cold water, engaging in intense aerobic exercise, paced breathing, or pairing paced breathing with paired muscle relaxation. And so, though you can notice that there are actually 2 P skills, we still spell tip with only one. But I say if it helps you remember that there are 2 P skills, then by all means spell it with 2, because in the end, what's going to be most helpful is that you are remembering and utilizing all of the skills available to you. So, why should we use tip skills? The tip skills change our body chemistry really quickly to reduce emotional arousal and feelings of being overwhelmed. They work really fast, sometimes within seconds to minutes, to bring down our emotional arousal. And they can be as effective as our maybe dysfunctional behaviors that we might be tempted to use when we're in these really painful emotional states. Um, and without the long-term or short-term consequences. So in that way, we could think of them like a fast-acting medication, except we don't have to pay for the medication or experience the possible side effects of it. Tip skills are really easy to use and don't require a lot of thinking, and that can be so important when we're in a state of high emotional arousal. We don't even feel like we're thinking clearly, right? We've all been in a situation where maybe we've been really angry or really overwhelmed with sadness, or maybe our anxiety and fear has just totally overtaken us, and all we have are these really ruminative thoughts surrounding whatever emotion we're in. We're kind of stuck in wise mind. And so tip is really effective and doesn't need us to kind of remember and engage in a lot of other things. It's really straightforward. So this can be an easy one to keep in our back pocket. I also love tip because they're pretty stealthy skills, which means that we can engage in them in public without others really knowing that we're using these skills. Sometimes that can be a barrier, right, to using other skills that we might talk about, even within the distress tolerance module. Sometimes, we'll go through distraction or self-soothe, and a lot of those skills can require a set of tools, right, or props even to engage in some of those skills. And sometimes we just don't have that available to us. And tip can be a really easy and effective way to bring down our emotional arousal when we don't have a lot in our current environment to help us do that. And when there's a lot of people around us in a situation where we kind of still need to be effective. So kind of started to allude to this already, but when do we use tip skills? This might be a situation when we are caught in emotion mind and just simply feel like we cannot get out of it, right? Like we've tried maybe doing other skills and trying to ask wise mind, like, what am I supposed to do in this situation? It just feels like we're not able to kind of tap into that skill set. So tip can really help us again, reduce that emotional arousal so that we can hear and tap into wise mind. It might also be when we're in crisis. Maybe we just lost our job or just got out of a relationship or lost someone dear to us, or maybe we're even in a car accident. Those sorts of crisis situations where something really big and emotionally latent just happened to us. And sometimes those situations ask us to still be effective. So these can be really great skills to use when both of those things are true. We're really overwhelmed, right? My third point, and we still need to be effective. This can also be really helpful when we feel like we're not processing information effectively. Like we are really in emotion mind, or the crisis has just overwhelmed us to a state where we feel like we can't even really take in to check the facts. And so help engaging in this and these sets of skills can be helpful in helping us to then engage in other skills that we might need to use. Um, And also, we might just feel like we're at the breaking point, like we've tried engaging in other skills, and instead of reducing, maybe they're actually amping up our emotional arousal and our distress. So, these can be really helpful when it almost feels like nothing else is working. So, how do they work? Well, tip really, it's designed to activate the and really manipulate almost like the nervous system. The nervous system is made up of two opposing systems: the sympathetic nervous system, which we can think of S for stress, and the parasympathetic nervous system. So P maybe for peace. And that's kind of how they work. So the stress or the sympathetic nervous system really amps up our body and prepares us for fight or flight. By doing that, it increases our arousal. So we're really alert. Our body is pumped full of these stress hormones to kind of get us ready to engage in an activity, whether that be fighting off a threat or fleeing from a threat, right? And so, because of that, our organs react in a certain way. Our muscles tense up, our heart rate speeds up, our breathing becomes shallower and faster, and even our eyes dilate during this heightened state, when our sympathetic nervous system is really amped up. And in contrast, our parasympathetic nervous system really acts to decrease that emotional arousal. So this is the system that we turn on when we are engaging in emotion regulation or distress tolerance skills. So when we are acting on this system, we are trying to slow down our heart rate, taking deeper and more efficient breaths to get that oxygen to all parts of our body, which then really helps us to relax overall, not just emotionally either, like physically, our muscles start to relax. And so, taking all of that together, TIP really acts to work with our body's chemistry to increase the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So, increasing the activity of that peaceful system and decreasing the activity of the sympathetic nervous system. So, the one that causes us to really feel and be aware of stress. So let's dive in, pun intended, I guess, to the first tip skill, which is tipping the temperature. This one has to do with cold water. And this is the best skill for when we have really strong emotions or strong urges to act on maybe more dangerous behaviors, maybe like self harm, for example. And this works by inducing the human or mammalian dive reflex. So I say mammalian because actually humans are not the only creatures to have this. It's really kind of a nerdy, cool skill to have, and to know about, which is just that when we are when mammals, humans included, are about to enter a freezing body of water, our body has this really cool protective mechanism where it slows down the heart rate to below even our resting heart rate, to help conserve energy for being in that really cold state, even without oxygen. So this is a really cool evolutionary mechanism that the body has evolved over time to help keep us safe. And we can use it to help us really deal and cope with strong emotions that are acting to intensify those emotions when maybe the intensity or even the emotion don't really fit the facts, right? So, what do we do when we are in this, when we are using this skill? So, the first thing is that we actually are going to bend at the waist to get our head below or equal to our heart. This is important, right? It is the human dive response. So, we're actually thinking about diving into water. So that's going to be a careful caveat when you think about it. And just so you are all aware, putting your head in a bowl of water, for example, does get your head to an equal place to your heart. So that totally counts and checks that box. You might also consider taking the ice pack or bowl of water and putting it in your lap, right? So that's definitely going to get you more forward, if that's possible. So now that we got, okay, we're gonna bend in our head, what do we do next? Well, while we're bending at the waist, we are going to hold our breath and then put our face actually into a bowl of cold water, or use a cold ice pack, maybe a bag of frozen vegetables, for example, and putting it on our eyes and cheeks. So really getting around this area. And that is going to kickstart um, tipping our body's temperature and really activating the system that's going to slow down our heart rate. Um, and we're gonna hold that for 30 seconds. So if you are in an area where there's a lot of distraction going on, you might have to do this a few times. The skill works best when the water is really cold and you're just focusing on engaging in this. Okay, so maybe you set a watch, or you're just counting in your head. Maybe it's Mississippi's, maybe it's not. 15, 30 seconds, start there, and just see, like, how am I feeling? Do I need to do this again? I will have a word of caution for you, is that the effects of cold water are actually pretty short-lived, unfortunately. So while it's super effective at getting us down to a place where we might be able to be effective in the moment, like really quickly, right? It's not going to maybe have us stay effective all day. So it is pretty easy for an out of control emotion to return if participants are not careful. So once an extreme arousal is reduced, so once we are able to get our emotion down to a more manageable place, it can be really important to kind of start layering on other skills. So practice a different set of skills that are appropriate for the problem at hand. So let me walk you through a few examples. So an example would be if you're really angry and you use ice water or the cold pack to reduce the intensity of your anger. But then later you start thinking about all the things that set off the anger in the first place. Anger is very likely to come back, right? The same is true of any kind of emotion. So the skill is only going to be effective in the short term. And if we start engaging in all the emotional or thought triggers in our head that originally set off the emotion, it might come back. Another example might be if we use cold water or an ice pack to interrupt our anxious ruminations, or a lot of anxiety thoughts that just are keeping us awake. It will be important to go back to bed and focus on something other than the anxiety inducing thoughts, right? So maybe that's a time when we use paced breathing, and then one of the other tip skills. I think I messed that sentence up. It will be important to use tip, the cold water, and then go back to bed and maybe use another tip skill like paced breathing, or maybe thinking about a pleasant memory, using that vivid imagery. A third example might be if we have a strong urge to engage in a problem behavior. And so then we use the ice water or cold pack to really reduce that urge. And it's really effective in the moment, and our arousal and urge comes down. But then a little while later, we go back to thinking about the problem behavior and the urge resurfaces. In that situation, it would be important to engage in a different activity, by maybe using distraction or problem solving immediately after using the ice, right? Because the ice might get us through, let's say, 30 minutes, right? But it probably won't get us through the whole day. So that is one thing just to keep in mind about changing the temperature, is that the effects can be short-lived. And so you might have to keep engaging in different skills after you've engaged in this one. The next caution I'm going to give you is that participants with any heart risk or allergy to the cold should not participate in the ice water exercise unless they've been cleared by a medical professional. So if you have any sort of question or concern about your heart Please do not engage in this activity until you've been cleared by a medical professional and brought that up with your individual therapist. We definitely want to keep you safe. And that's really because it does work so effectively and so quickly on bringing your heart rate down that we just wouldn't want anything to happen. Okay, so our next skill is intense exercise. Intense exercise can be another effective and quick way to calm down our body when we're experiencing intense emotions that are really like amping up all of the energy in our bodies. So, this might be a situation where we're feeling very agitated or angry, overwhelmed, maybe with again like anxiety, ruminative thoughts. And so, this can be really helpful in calming the body down when we're really amped up. And it works on this idea of expending the body's stored energy that really comes on after we're emotionally aroused, right? So if we think of fight or flight, our body gets stressed out. We have all this physical energy with, our muscles all tensing and our heart rate speeding up. And so actually just kind of engaging in intense exercise because our body's already in that state can kind of help our body reach this peak point so that it can kind of relax. Seems a little counterintuitive, but can be really effective. So, an example might be that at the end of the day, when you have a million things going on, and maybe a million and one went left of how you envisioned them going, and you still have to maybe help the kids with homework and make dinner and then prepare for the next day, and the list just seems exhaustive. You might take time for a short break to go for a run, or maybe you put the baby in a stroller and you take a really brisk walk in order to decrease any strong negative emotions before turning back to the activities that await you at home. Research has shown that intense exercise for any kind of any kind can be really effective on our mood. So decreasing negative mood and even decreasing our ruminative thoughts is also shown to increase our positive affect afterwards. So this might be another skill that if you wake up and are just feeling kind of blah or sad and you really want to just improve your mood and even our willingness, right, to go through all the things that are before us in the day, this can be a really great skill to engage in first thing if that's a time when you're particularly vulnerable to being in emotion mind. So when we engage in this skill, we're really just thinking about engaging in exercise, intense exercise for 20 minutes. So this is, doesn't have to be an hour, just 20 minutes. Start there of really intense exercise. So that's the other part that I really want to point out is um, that for this to really re-regulate our body to be in a less emotional state, it is important that we really give it our all, regardless of what the activity we choose to do is. So for example, if I'm doing jumping jacks, then I am doing them as fast as I can, right? The point is really to exhaust almost our body in that 20 minutes because so it can like kick on this homeostasis part of our parasympathetic nervous system, kind of like, right? We want that moment. So I do just want to stress that like we're really giving it our all and going all out for those 20 minutes, even if it's something silly like doing jumping jacks or holding a plank, right? While the baby is in the high chair or whatever it is. There's more creative ways than we, I think, give ourselves credit for using this skill. I'm happy to talk more about that in group on Tuesday. The next skill is paced breathing. So this really works to slow down our breathing when we're really amped up by emotion. And so generally the heart beats faster during in breaths and slows down during out breaths. So one thing that we're really going to be mindful of is those out breaths and making sure that they are longer than the in breaths. The change in the heart rate is influenced by the sympathetic nervous system activation breathing in, and then the parasympathetic kind of works to breathe out. So it's kind of cool that even in such a everyday activity like taking a single breath, both of those mechanisms are at play in balancing each other out. So when we use pace breathing and we're focusing on that exhale, we're trying to cause changes in the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So in a similar way to the dive reflex, slowing breathing to approximately like 5 or 6 breaths per minute is really effective at reducing our emotional arousal by, again, you guessed it, the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we do this, we're going to focus on breathing really deep into our belly. So you may have noticed that when you get into a state of high arousal, for example, anxiety, if that's something that you feel vulnerable to, you might notice that your breathing really, you notice it a lot up here in your chest. And it's like, now that's obviously very exaggerated, but if you start to have a panic attack, for example, that might be really what it feels like. It feels like your chest is doing a lot of the moving. It's kind of going up and down. And what we want to do is actually focus on something a little less intuitive. So it helps me to put one hand on my chest here and one just above my belly button, right on my diaphragm, so that I remember that I am trying to breathe into my belly and I am trying not to move this top hand that's on my chest. So when step 1 says breathe deep into your belly, I actually want my bottom hand to move. So I want my bottom hand to go out. I am breathing in so deep that my stomach is like a balloon. It's just expanding in my stomach rather than doing this, right? I want my chest actually to be pretty still. And so when I have my hand up here, this reminds me that this part should be pretty still, despite how I might have an urge or inclination to engage in deep breathing. I want the work to be really in my belly or in my abdomen. And so first step is breathing into that bottom hand. And we're gonna slow or pace the inhale and exhale. So I know in Linehan handout 6, it says to do 5 or 6 breaths. I'm gonna say that kind of stresses me out, actually. That sometimes can be too long for me. So I might do 3 or 3 and 5. So breathing in for the count of 3 and then out for the count of 5. When we do this, we also want to pay attention to whether we're breathing in through our nose or our mouth. So when we do this, we want to breathe in through the nose and actually out as if we're blowing through a straw. So right? And again, when we breathe out, my bottom hand should be the one that's moving. It should be coming in. So there's a lot going on this, and it takes a lot of practice. An easy way, again, to make sure that you're engaging in deep belly breathing is to maybe have your hands there. Maybe you take a pen, right? Or if you're laying down, and put it on your belly just to make sure that the pen is moving up and down and not so much your chest. And the last thing we want to, just as a reminder, is have the exhales longer than the inhales. So if nothing else, even if you're breathing with your chest, just make sure that the exhales are longest, because that's what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck and slow your heart rate down the most effectively. If you get all the other steps in, wonderful, keep working on it. But if not, just focus on getting the exhale down. That is really going to be the most important way of getting the most out of this exercise. There are also several apps that you can use to help you engage in paced breathing. This can be kind of helpful, especially when we're starting out, and maybe the counting freaks us out or amps us up, right? And so some of these could be like, if you have an Apple Watch, there's the Breathe app on it. There's also a free app through the VA called My Virtual Hope Box that can walk you through what's called controlled breathing on their app. And there's also, I believe, UCLA Mindfulness. That's a free app that also has a lot of guided meditations, including controlled breathing, that can be really helpful for helping us start to really become experts in paced breathing. The last skill we're going to talk about today is paired muscle relaxation. And this is really pairing paced breathing with tensing and relaxing some of our muscles. And the objective here is to relax and release body tension very quickly. And I love this one because, like some of the others, right, more like paced breathing, it can be so sneaky. And so no one really has to know if we're ever in a situation where it might be difficult to engage in something that's more obvious. So paired muscle relaxation is a variation of progressive muscle relaxation, which is widely used. So if you've heard of that, they're very similar. The strategy here is to tense muscle groups and notice the sensation of the tension while breathing in. So if you think about paced breathing, we're breathing in. For example, I might use my hand. That will be easiest here. So I'm breathing in and really tensing my hand. And as I breathe out, I relax it. So while I'm breathing out, I might even say the word relax in my mind's eye as I let go of the tension in my hand. And afterwards, it can be really helpful to just spend a moment or two noticing the difference between what it was like when you really tensed your muscles to relaxing them. This is similar to intense exercise in the fact that oftentimes when we're in these really strong emotional states, our body has this way of like tensing up, right? So for me, I notice that even throughout the day without even being in distress, my shoulders start to kind of like creep up to my ears, right? I carry a lot of tension there. So when I'm really emotionally aroused, my shoulders are just out of control. So while when we are intentionally increasing and intensing them, it can actually help those muscles to like relax. Without doing that, it can be kind of hard to just say like, okay, relax, right? So it can help break that cycle by paying attention and being very aware of tensing certain muscle groups for the sake and hope of then releasing them. This crisis survival skill also helps us to notice tension and relax muscles while also kind of pairing and conditioning ourselves to pair actually relaxing our body with telling ourselves to relax. So often we'll tell ourselves, okay, I just need to relax, but we're freaking out and doing all of this stuff, right? And we're not even necessarily aware of what it feels like to actually be relaxed in our body. So really practicing paired muscle relaxation can be helpful in even teaching ourselves how to relax our bodies when we're saying the word relax. So kind of has a bit of mindfulness there. So when we are using brief paired muscle relaxation, this can be really great when we don't have a lot of time. So when we have very, very little amount of time, or when there's a lot of stuff going on, like maybe we're in public, this can be a really great skill. So essentially we are going to inhale while breathing and tensing those sets of muscles. And this can be even without being obvious to others, right? So maybe we pull our feet up to tense our calves. So if you can try that right now, you can notice that they're really tense. Or maybe you tense your thighs by just lifting your legs up really quickly in your seat. Maybe you can really clench your stomach, right, by tensing your core and then relaxing. Or maybe it's even by clenching your buttocks, right? All of those things we can do without drawing a lot of attention to ourselves. And this handout 6B has very detailed instructions for how we can kind of go about and start to really implement paired muscle relaxation. So I encourage you to check that out. One final reminder about this skill is that getting relaxation and the feeling of relaxation paired with the word relax while exhaling can take a fair amount of practice. So once we learn awareness of both the physical tension and the difference between that and relaxation in our body, then we can be ready to work on getting relaxation paired with the word relax while breathing out. So, all I'm trying to say is that this can be a step process, and you might have to practice multiple times a day until our bodies can really start to learn what it feels like to relax. So, hang in there and keep practicing. As a few final steps, I want to leave you with. The first one is just to check your environment. So, given all the skills that we talked about today, like tipping the temperature is one that's going to require something in your environment, right? So, just take a few minutes to check out, what do you have around the house? Do you have ice readily available? What about an ice pack that you can kind of grab really quickly to tip in your body's temperature? If you don't have an ice pack, well, what about frozen fruits or vegetables that you could use in a pinch, right? Something that's going to be long enough to get over both areas of your face. The next step I would encourage you all to use is just to take a few minutes to kind of brainstorm and get creative. Some of these skills, like tip the temperature or intense exercise, can take some creativity to incorporate into our lives more routinely, especially when we have demands of jobs or kids. So I really encourage you to think about how you could, one, remind yourself that that's a skill that you have available to you, and two, implement that. So, are there some steps nearby that you can run up and down for 20 minutes if you find yourself distressed? How are you going to remind yourself to do jumping jacks when you feel that distress kind of amping up in your body? And then lastly, I just want to encourage you to use available and free resources to help kind of engage in these skills. Obviously, we have phone coaching, and that's so wonderful. But some of these skills, like paced breathing and paired muscle relaxation, can be used even when we're not in crisis. And sometimes practicing that can be really helpful for building those muscles. And so, getting into a routine of using those skills can be really useful for when we're in those more intense situations. And so some of the apps that I mentioned earlier today are the VA's My Virtual Hope Box and UCLA's mindfulness app, may be of benefit to you. And